Hey everybody! Back today with episode 4 of What If, and today we're going to be moving into the Kingdom of the Sea. Today's story is about what might have happened if Fathom and Anemone switched places growing up. Like the last couple videos, I changed some dates and ages and moved things around to suit the story, so please keep in mind that it won't fit perfectly to exact canon details. This one has actually been really fun to write about, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it as much as I did. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. The morning of the traditional animus testing ceremony dawned calm and breezy, a perfect, crisp ocean sunrise reflecting warm shades off gentle waves. Fathom rarely saw such beautiful mornings, since he was usually down in the palace with his pack of brothers, and this one was truly exquisite. It seemed fitting that, on the day his fate would change forever, even the sky seemed to be happy. Fathom shifted his talons nervously, excitement warring with the remnants of his caution and churning in his stomach. Last time there'd been a test, he'd deliberately missed it, gone to great lengths, in fact, to hide his powers. At the time, he'd convinced himself it was the smart thing to do, the safe thing to do. Back then, he'd still thought that maybe, someday, his mother would notice him, would see how hard he worked and how clever he was and how polite and well-behaved, and that eventually, Coral would love him. But then Anemone was born, his perfect, sweet little baby sister, who he loved but couldn't help being jealous of. Turtle had been trying for years, working endlessly to be good enough for Queen Coral, but all his sister had to do was be born to win their mother's eternal love. Turtle didn't want to be in the shadows anymore, and if Coral couldn't love him for his other skills, he'd lay his last card on the table and pray for the best. So yeah, he was a little nervous as the ceremony progressed. Until finally the officiant dragon got to Turtle, and said the age-old words. And Turtle revealed his magic, reveling in the way his mother's prideful exclamations echoed over the shore. Time passed, and Turtle enjoyed some of the best years of his life. It was like suddenly Coral saw him, knew his name, and was interested in his days, and cared about him. It was like having a family, not a crowd of brothers who all wanted to best each other, or tutors who didn't particularly care about yet another useless-seeming prince. It was Coral sitting next to him in the afternoon and reading her stories, asking his thoughts if she was stuck or if she wasn't sure about a character. It was dragons finally recognizing him as a prince, as someone to be respected, instead of yet another failed attempt. For once, Turtle felt like he was loved. And yeah, maybe it was only because of his freaky chance of nature powers. Maybe if he wasn't an animus, Coral wouldn't love him. But he'd take what he could get, and this was better than being constantly swept to the side. Meanwhile, Anemone was feeling more and more slighted. Growing up, her earliest memories were of her mother, doting on her. Coral loved Anemone, loved her the mostest, because Anemone was special. But then there was her brother, and he was special too. And at first, it seemed like Mother loved both of them. And it was fun! Anemone and Turtle got to play together, and they went with Mother everywhere. And everyone loved them, and they were the best, and everything was perfect. Except, as the years passed and Anemone got older and smarter and stayed plain as boring old oyster shells, she started to notice a few things. One, even though she was the princess and she would one day be queen, Coral spent more time with Turtle, talking about stories and the war and his magic. All things that an enemy should know about. 2. Queen Coral used to never let an enemy out of her sight. Even after the leash had come off years ago, since she and Turtle complained about it getting in the way of their games nonstop, Coral had always insisted on being close to her dragonettes. But lately she seemed forgetful. Not of Turtle, never of her precious magic child, but of her only heir. Which was extremely stupid and unfair. And why was stupid Turtle Mother's favorite when Anemone was the special one? For years, the royal family slowly shifted, as Turtle, step by step, inched Anemone to the side as he impressed his parents more and more. It seemed like everything she could do, Turtle could do better. Bitterness curled in Anemone's claws, tainting every interaction with her older brother. But things came to a head when the king was captured. Coral was distraught, raging through the palace, sending out her search parties and scouts almost constantly. Meanwhile, without Gil to lead their diplomats, relations with the other tribes, even their allies, began to crumble. And Turtle suddenly remembered why he'd once been scared of revealing his power. Coral suddenly pushed him harder than ever, demanding magic that could help them save her king, magic that could win the war. She didn't care about the old stories, threats of soulless dragons going on rampages. Coral only wanted Turtle to do better, be better, for her, for their tribe. And Turtle, despite his misgivings, could never say no. Because every time Coral proposed an idea, every time she asked for something, Turtle only saw a chance to prove himself to her, to earn her love. And even if her ideas grew increasingly dangerous, changing from a map that shows Miguel to send a knife to take revenge on Queen Scarlet, Turtle couldn't stop now. If he stopped helping her, his mother would hate him forever. Turtle couldn't go back to the way it was before. He couldn't be unloved and unwanted again. So he did the spells, and little by little he sold his soul for his mother's approval. Meanwhile, Anemone had been completely swept to the wayside. Her grief warred with her anger over being essentially forgotten in her brother's wake. Not only was her father gone, maybe dead, but she'd basically lost her mother too. And her brother, because the two of them were always gone, always away at war councils or doing magic lessons with Gross Whirlpool. But over time, her anger dwindled, tempered by grief and hardship and a newfound fear as she watched Turtle cast spell after spell after spell. Slowly, Anemone started noticing new things. 1, Turtle was not himself anymore. He was paranoid and clingy, never out of sight of their mother, and constantly looking to her for approval. 2, he was eating less, and he didn't read his story scrolls anymore, which was crazy because Turtle used to love snacking and reading those dumb stories all the time. 3, she thought maybe he was going insane. Turtle was changed, and Anemone knew the stories about what happened to animus dragons who used too much of their magic. Things only got worse when news finally made it to the Sea Kingdom. King Gil was dead. He'd been denied water until he dehydrated, a slow, painful death for a sea-wing. That was Coral's first murderous spell demand, a knife to seek out Queen Scarlet's heart. Turtle laid the enchantment alone in a circular room. He scratched out words onto scrolls, getting his spell just right. Anemone knew he hadn't stopped to rest at all while he worked. She knew he was obsessed. She knew that something was different about this time. Before he said the final words, Anemone snuck into the room, begged her brother to stop, to consider the consequences of his actions. Turtle had snarled at her, telling her to get out, to leave, to stop trying to steal all their mother's love for herself. Turtle had never yelled at an enemy before. She was embarrassed to admit it, but an enemy had fled. Tears gathering in her eyes, she'd hid in their old nursery, burying herself in memories of when her brother loved her, even if her mother didn't. It was the spell that drove her brother over the edge. The first time Turtle used his magic to end another dragon's life, when he felt the sticky tendrils of his own power directing the knife, something in his mind snapped. However, he didn't go completely insane, and Turtle wasn't the only dragon affected. He and Coral were together when it happened, when he felt the knife go through Queen Scarlet's armor, through her scales, past her ribs, and into her heart. Turtle collapsed, howling, magic bursting out of him as he shouted his pain to the world. The magic washed over Coral, threaded with Turtle's maniac paranoia, his fear, and his growing instability. Suddenly, the Kingdom of Sea was left with a queen who was worried everyone was out to get her, whose son was an animus completely leashed to his mother's will, no longer able to form thoughts of his own. Anemone found out when she found herself summoned to the court the next morning. Her mother was stiff on her throne, eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. Turtle was staring straight ahead into nothing, scales dull and scraped. Anemone felt the tension in the air as panic scraped at her throat while she bowed and asked her queen how she could be of service. Coral had summoned dozens of dragons, her commanders, her lieutenants, everyone who held a position of power in her kingdom. And she questioned them, almost interrogated them, turning them inside out, pinning her own paranoia on them. Anemone watched in horror as Coral found each and every one of them guilty of something. Treason, spying, attempted murder, anything and everything, and some things too preposterous to be believed. Anemone watched as Turtle executed them for their mother. That was when Anemone realized something had gone terribly wrong, and that was when she snuck out of the throne room and fled the castle. As Anemone ran, terror in her wings and tears in her eyes, the Kingdom of the Sea was thrown into complete chaos. Anemone hid off the coast of the Sky Kingdom, for once in her life praying her family had forgotten her, as the entire continent was slowly thrown into upheaval. The news trickled to her slowly. The Sky Kingdom was in shambles, as was Byrne's alliance. The new Queen Ruby had withdrawn into her borders, withcalling all her soldiers. Queen Glacier had seized the opportunity to launch a massive attack on the Mudwings and the rest of Byrne's army, and apparently the casualties were in the thousands. Worse yet, the Sea-Wing Kingdom had gone completely dark. No messages went in or out. Scouts sent and disappeared, even Sea-Wing scouts. Nobody saw their armies. The only thing coming out of the Sea-Wing Kingdom was thousands of Sea-Wings, fleeing as if death himself were on their tails. And perhaps it was, Anemone thought miserably, without any way of knowing what her mother and Turtle were doing now. The Sea-Wing Kingdom had become a death trap, and her entire tribe was trying to flee. It seemed like an enemy's tribe, and perhaps the whole continent, were to be plunged into a darkness even blacker than the agony of war. It seemed like there was nobody alive who could save them. That is, until Anemone met Tsunami, a missing sea-wing princess with a singular hate for magic and a ferocious desire to, united with her sister, save their tribe. And that's where the story is going to end. Yes, I know it's a little bit of a dramatic ending, but rest assured, Tsunami is about to go kick some butt and save her tribe while the rest of the Dragonettes use the opportunity to stop the war. I ended up having an amazing time with the story. I feel like it really came together beautifully, and I loved how Turtle and Anemone basically flipped positions in the end. What did you guys think of my take on the story? Do you think this might have happened if Turtle revealed himself instead of enchanting his sister? Anyways, be sure to check out the description for links to my socials and take a look at my other What If videos if you haven't already. Remember to like and comment if you enjoyed the story and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching and please have a wonderful week.